pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have Selectwoman Tara Carr, Selectman Bob Belden, and First Selectman Steve Dunn present. Is there any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Zinza?
Nope, we're not signing up.
I'm sorry, who was that again? I don't think.
Robert Zinza?
Oh, there you are, Bob.
Good evening. Robert Zinzer, 49 Obtuse Road South. In July of 2019, the Board of Selectmen established the Center School Use Ad Hoc Committee. The charge of the committee was to find the highest and best use of the center school facility. Through criteria setting, community research, and a review of the documents related to the facility, the committee operated from August 5th, 2019 to July 28th of 2020 in pursuit of this goal. The committee developed a spreadsheet of approximately 143 committees, commissions, organizations, houses of worship, boards, and town departments. These organizations served a broad scope of Brookfield residents from preschoolers through senior citizens. A detailed survey was sent to all organizations. The committee received 37 responses, a response rate of 25.8%. The respondents were invited to present to the committee their current and evolving needs for programs and services, meeting space, storage, etc. 7 of the respondents made extensive presentations to the committee. The committee presented a comprehensive report to the Board of Selectmen in August of 2020. The recommendation was, and I quote, "The entire center school facility should be renovated and repurposed to accommodate a new library, the Parks and Recreation Department, and made available for other periodic community use. The library and the Parks and Rec Department have the most immediate and compelling needs vis-a-vis the criteria and provided services to the broadest and largest segments of Brookfield's population." The committee also recognized the condition of the center school building. Again, quoting the report, "Utilizing public funds to renovate a building that is approximately 83 years old and substantially built with combustible materials needs to be rigorously examined for the longer term. While the center school may have, quote, good bones, would a complete tear down of the building and building from the ground up give the town an all-new structure to house a library and adequate space for the Parks and Recreation Department and other use make better sense?" The report is available on the town website. It's 56 pages long. I suggest you read it if you've not already done so. 2 primary conclusions came out of this report. First of all, that the joint use of the center school facility by the Brookfield Library and the Brookfield Parks and Rec Department is the highest and best use of the facility. Second, that the entire center school facility needs to be examined to determine the viability of rehabilitating an 83-year-old building versus tearing it down and constructing new facilities. You have the answer to the report's first conclusion. You don't need another committee to compile a wish list. What you don't have is the answer to the report's second conclusion. You don't know the true viability of that building. Stop asking what we can do with the facility and determine if the building is worth using at all. Town boards and committees are expending time and resources planning what we can do with a building which may not be even usable at all. Ask the right questions, get the answers, and move forward. Thank you.
Gwen Arment?
That's live. Good evening. Gwen Arment, 62 Indian Trail. I'm on the zoning board. At our zoning meeting on January 25th, we were informed that one of our alternate members had been appointed to replace a member who had resigned just after being elected to the board, and all without the knowledge of our chairman. The new member had been approved by the Democrat Town Committee and appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Our town charter specifies that any departing member must be replaced by someone from the same political party. This was not the case. The appointed person is an unaffiliated, and now the chairman of the zoning board. When the appointment was questioned and contested by the zoning board chairman and other members of the board, the response by Attorney Beecher was that breaking the charter was okay because the DTC approved. Now, with the vacancy of that alternate, another person is being appointed. Should that person be a Democrat or a Republican? He has been a Republican, but the Republican Town Committee never interviewed nor recommended this person for the position. Does it work one way for one group and not for the other? The town charter was created by the town of Brookfield and voted on by its residents to oversee the town governance. It may be altered by the Board of Selectmen, but not without the vote of the people. It specifically states that a board member shall, meaning must, be replaced by a member of the same political party. Not can, not might, nothing unspecific. It's very specific. A party member, not an unaffiliated person. So, are a couple or a few people changing doctrine law without the consent of the public? For whose benefit? And by breaking that doctrine, does it leave the town open for litigation? Will it invalidate any approved applications? Will it invalidate our insurance or provisions for member immunity? Mr. Beecher told us not to worry about these things. Zoning board regulations are broken regularly to accommodate developers in the town center area. Who benefits? If we are governing members who alter doctrine so cavalierly, what will become of the town of Brookfield? Thank you. Hand this. So sorry, Mom.
That's okay. I'm doing it too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy Cohen.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Andy Kame, Fernbrook Drive. I'm opposed to the appointment of Attorney Matthew Grimes to the Zoning Commission as a Republican alternate. Matt Grimes is not endorsed by the Republican Party for the vacancy for specific reasons. Mr. Grimes was recently voted off the BRTC because he exhibits violent, psychotic personality and lacks the ability to control his anger. During a vote recount meeting in this very room over the summer, during discussions, Mr. Grimes threatened a former selectman, George Walker, with physical violence, and he moved to attack Mr. Walker. Grimes was restrained by his campaign advisor who broke off the attack. Mr. Walker is a respected professional leader. The community has always put the needs of Brookfield citizens first. These unfortunate events were reported to the Brookfield Police Department via complaint from Mr. Walker and to the Board of Selectmen in correspondence. All in Brookfield can surely agree that we do not need violent, psychotic individuals on any board or commission. Mr. Grimes has stated he worked for the town of Bethel and New Milford. In fact, he was dismissed or left both positions after short periods. Most notably, with the recent appointment of Kurt Timmerman to the Zoning Commission as a voting member, the right of refusal was sought by Mr. Dunn from Aaron Zimmer, the chairman of the Democratic Town Committee. This was a proper courtesy in keeping with past practice. This practice of right of refusal has not been followed for the proposed Grimes appointment. Should not the same rules and courtesies be applied to both parties? Yes, they should. Please respect the RTC as you do the DTC, and via past practice, allow the RTC to submit qualified, non-violent individuals to represent their party as provided in the town charter. There is no need to rush, as there are currently 2 alternates on the commission. If Mr. Grimes wishes to change his party affiliation and serve as a Democrat, that would be up to the DTC. That party change can be accomplished in 1 day. It's my understanding that at least 1 Democratic vacancy is forthcoming on the Zoning Commission. I ask you to withdraw Mr. Grimes' nomination as a Republican candidate for the alternate commissioner on the zoning commission. As noted, this change of party would be the best approach, at which time the DTC can submit his name for the next Democratic vacancy if they desire. Thank you. There's a copy here of George Walker's statement to the Board of Selectmen dated September 5th, and there's also a copy of an article dated March 25th, 1999, which from Richmond College, where Mr. Grimes punched a fellow student during a debate. This is a long history, and you should very much consider the effect of that appointment. It's not good for Brookfield. Thank you very much.
Austin Montero.
All right, good evening. Austin Montero, 17 Dairy Farm Drive. Tonight, I would like to recommend that the Board of Selectmen vote to not approve a land lease to Homeland Towers for a 5G tower, which according to their proposed locations could be going less than 100 feet from the Brookfield High School gymnasium, which I just happened to be in and had full service, by the way. This is also located in an R80 residential zone. I have seen the proposed site plan options, and to me, they're all a no-go, with the biggest reason being that it's right next to our high school where we have over 1,000 plus people in attendance every day inside for a 6 to 8 hour time span. And the biggest issue when it comes to 5G frequency waves is chronic exposure to it. It's not 5 minutes or 6 minutes, it's hours upon hours upon hours. So daily exposure for 8 hours is a big problem and would definitely qualify as chronic exposure. There is no opting out once one of these towers is 100 feet or less in a situation away from you. There have been many municipalities around the country and locally that have pushed back on towers next to schools specifically because of the obvious issues. I recommend that we do the same. 5G towers, EMF pollution, radiation are one of the biggest problems affecting our health today and will be in the future. Not to mention these towers will lower property values. I know option D is behind Hamlin Court, which is a nice part of town, so having to sell a home in that area with that in your backyard is just not going to happen. So I talked to a few of those folks that live over there today, very upset. And on top of that, the FAA has already determined 5G is powerful enough to disrupt airlines, but it's okay to put next to a school. So that doesn't make any rational sense to me. On top of all that, the only time Homeland Towers, per a previous meeting, maybe 3 months ago, was not approved was because of slimy salamanders being present to where a tower was potentially going. So the question is really, do we care more about slimy salamanders? I don't mean to laugh, but it's kind of crazy, than people, than children in a school. 5G, if you guys aren't aware, is an entirely different animal than 3G or 4G LTE, which has hundreds of studies of harmful effects. Essentially, 5G frequency waves is Wi-Fi on steroids. Add this to kids already having their phones in their pockets all day, it's really a recipe for a disaster waiting to happen. Now driving, if you drive from the Four Corners to exit 9, there are already 12 5G towers already up. The main reason we need to install so many is because of the frequency gigahertz levels that these towers function on. So they don't travel far. Topography plays a big role. They're blocked by trees and glass buildings and all that. So the higher amount of frequency means the more disruptions you're going to need. So I asked the Board of Selectmen to not approve a land lease within 2,500 feet of a school or a residential area. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Robert Guarino.
Hi, Robert Guarino, 12 Rocky Road. So, good evening. I believe the firing of Fern Semniak by Steve is unethical. All of us who love this town should feel strong responsibility to the incredible employees who make the town function day in and day out, many of whom Fern personally hired. In her position as HR director, Mr. Dunn has stated on several occasions now the employees are great, and that in large part is thanks to Fern. Many Brookfield residents are aware of the news that Steve Dunn has decided not to hire a qualified human resource person for the town of Brookfield. Tonight, I'm addressing those of you who may not have heard this news. I'm concerned that many residents of Brookfield do not realize that Mr. Dunn has decided to take on the responsibilities. When I heard this, I was shocked. I immediately became concerned. Part of what makes business and government work is a check and balance system. The system is designed to protect people from abusing their power, to allow employees a safe space to discuss their concerns, not the toxic and hostile work environment that Mr. Dunn has now created. I ask you tonight to give Mr. Dunn's reckless disregard for Fern, an employee of Brookfield. How does this person simply put himself in charge of an immensely important function like HR? Who would feel safe and protected seeking counsel, reporting harassment, or unethical behavior in a work environment like this? I can't even imagine what he's thinking. But one thing did come to mind. He doesn't care about the legal liability he's placing on the town. He doesn't care how much is paid out in lawsuits because it's your money, not his, that's footing the bill. I would ask anyone here tonight or anyone watching this meeting, does this make sense to you, to have no one qualified to oversee the human resource duties of the town? A town, by the way, with a $150 million budget and over 300 employees. So at coffee time about 2 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Mr. Belden, who I have a ton of respect for considering his career. And we got into the conversation of TSAs, which is a transfer service agreement when you carve out a business unit. So I'm going through that. In my world, Bob was responsible for that for IBM, I believe, for a very long time, and really just did an incredible job. Ton of respect for him. So I asked Bob what was the hardest part. I told him I was struggling with finance, and he said, no, the hardest part is HR. It's also the most important part. It's the first thing he would do is get rid of the HR department because it opened up IBM to the most amount of liability they could possibly have when managing through this TSA. So if it was too risky for IBM to keep HR on their books for another company, why do we think it's not too risky for you to run it? My only concern is the taxpayers, the money that's being spent, and what we could be opened up to. We want to make sure our money's protected, our employees are protected, and that the town is in a position to continue to be successful. Thank you.
Mr. George Walker.
My name is Ed Bossio, 2 Whitetail Lane.
George Walker, 24 Winona Drive.
Tara, I know, I thank you for your service. Bob, I know, I thank you for your service. Steve, I don't know, but I thank you all for your service, for all your time you put in. Now, I was a member of the BRTC during Bonnie Smith's time, and I am now still a member. I've worked with Bob. Now, at this time, when I am part of the vacancy committee of the BRTC, I respect you all for your time and everything, but I also like to be respected. And when someone comes up and then get appointed to a job without coming in front of the vacancy committee, whether it be Republican or Democrat, I feel disrespected. Thank you.
Okay, let me interject and clarify once again that we are 2 of the members of the vacancy committee of the BRTC, and we spend a lot of time vetting people, interviewing them, and so forth. This is a small file of some of the many pages of interviews and processing of paperwork that we go through, trying to come up with candidates who potentially could be a part of any of our commissions and so forth. And we're really very dismayed to see that there are appointments being made that on openings that we haven't even been brought to the BRTC or the vacancy committee's attention, and that you as a board are going forward and appointing people. I won't dwell very much on that incident that happened in this very room with someone that Mr. Grimes that you're trying to appoint here to the zoning commission, but I think it's important that you readdress what I sent to you back in September, and Mr. Belden, there'll be a copy for you available to see that. That was not properly addressed and so forth. And it's important that we not start to set precedents where only that the DTC and the BRTC is being ignored. And we should be given the opportunity and the courtesy to be able to vet people, vet Republicans, to bring forward to be put on these various commissions. Thank you very much.
Michelle Bird.
Good evening, Michelle Berg, 8 Stony Farm Lane. Fern Smenyak moved to Brookfield in 1988, where she established herself as a pillar in our community while raising her 3 sons. She has coached and mentored hundreds of children of Brookfield while volunteering countless selfless hours to sports teams and local organizations. Fern has worked hard, dedicated herself, and is well respected in the town of Brookfield. She deserves to be treated better than this. Fern is an outstanding leader in her position of Human Resource Director for the town of Brookfield. She has been steadfast with great success in her position. I know firsthand her professionalism and exceptional work ethic, as I once worked for the town of Brookfield. Due to these unfortunate circumstances, the morale has plummeted amongst town employees at Town Hall. They are fearful of retaliation and their own job security. This has really shaken the confidence of town employees and their trust in our current first selectman. The firing of Fern Smenyak is totally uncalled for, unlawful, and unjust. This is an embarrassment to our beloved town. Fern has been an incredible asset to our community of Brookfield. This firing reeks of retaliation, desperation, and deceit. Do the right thing, restore Fern's position, and let's get her back to work. Restore integrity in Town Hall and move Brookfield forward. I would like to add how incredibly inappropriate it is for Mr. Dunn to be taking on the role of Human Resource Director. This is a major conflict of interest, especially after trying to acquire a pension he knew he did not qualify for. This monkey business is just bad for Brookfield. Mr. Dunn worked successfully with Fern Smenyak without any issues for 6 long years. The firing of Fern Smenyak is a political hit job.
Mr. Rich Saluga.
Rich Saluga, for 32 Great Heron Lane. First, with respect to the proposed tax abatement, at your last meeting, what was frustrating to me was that this board seemed, and I'm putting aside any issue of whether the tax abatement is a good or bad thing. I'm looking at the process, and what was frustrating was the board seemed to lack sufficient information and communication among themselves to move this item, yet incredibly, a majority of you did so. It was fairly clear that you were not prepared and did not have a full grasp of the proposal. One of you incorrectly stated it was 2 different properties when it was only 1. Another did not know exactly where all the parking spaces were located. And Ms. Carr, to her credit, asked for documentation to review before voting, and yet it was not provided. Mr. Belton also stated that that material should have been provided. I understand that this documentation 3 weeks later was only provided a few days ago. Again, I'm flabbergasted by this. Further, Mr. Dunn stated at that meeting that the Board of Finance chair, quote, agreed that the abatement is good for the town, end of quote. This does not appear to be an honest account, since at the Board of Finance meeting a few days later, and in written correspondence, the Board of Finance chair does not say that at all. In fact, he indicates some opposition to the abatement. Second, your minutes of the 1/8/24 meeting state that a discussion was held on the dismissal of the HR director. This should be changed because it's a false statement. How could you have possibly had a discussion when 2 of you stated very clearly you had no intention of discussing the issue? I believe this board owes an apology to the community, to the attendees at the meeting, both here and online, and especially Ms. Smenyak, for putting an item on the agenda which you knew would not be discussed. On top of that, you disrespected all of us by waiting 2 hours before announcing you would not discuss it. You were specifically asked during public comment at that time to move the item up on the agenda, and if not doing that, at least state whether there would be an open discussion. With apparent utter contempt, you did neither of those things. In addition, published reports indicated that the dismissal by Mr. Dunn was not known to either of the selectmen. This was also referenced during public comment. Again, there was an opportunity to clarify that, but Mr. Belden waited 2 hours until when he was directly asked by Ms. Carr if he knew ahead of time. He then tried to clarify by explaining the difference, the semantic difference between formal notification and informal advisement. Again, this dishonesty, lack of transparency, and poor communication makes everything you do suspicious, and therefore more likely that this dismissal was unjustified. I would respectfully request you reconsider and reinstate Ms. Speniak to avoid any major legal expenses. Thank you.
Steve Belita.
Hi, Stephen Belita, 62 Indian Trail. There's a phrase that's pretty much in all of our lives, and that is actions speak louder than words. And I'm hearing that this committee here asks for the opinion, recommendations, talks to the DTC, and yet ignores the RTC. I was at the first Selectmen debate, and Mr. Dunn, you gave an impassioned speech, which I took to heart, about everyone being united. I'm here, I'm running for this office to unite people. That's why I'm running with Mr. Belden. He's an independent, but we want to bring everybody together. The problem I have is actions speak louder than words. I see that the RTC is being completely ignored with recommendations or opinions or input. That doesn't bring people together. I'm afraid that phrase is going to follow you around. Actions speak louder than words, but not in a good way, if we don't bring everybody together and unite them like we were promised. Thank you.
Nelson.
All right, Nelson Malwitz, 1 Great Heron Lane in Newbury Village. I'm going to bring a new subject up, and this one, it was in May of 2018 that we had this macro burst hit Brookfield, and so some of the properties still north of the Four Corners are still pretty heavily blighted, and I know there's been property owners have rights, but we'll go by this for the last 6 years, and it's a challenge to be looking at the blight. That's quite heavy. Looks a little bit like Appalachia. My apologies to Appalachia. And then there's new developments going up in there by AR Builders, another one at 883 Federal Road, and they want to put more there, but this blight just continues, and it's going to be a challenge for those developers who are investing good money to rent those places because of that continuing situation. And it's in court, I know, or what, anyway, there's got to be something you can do to hit the button to finally rid ourselves of the blight that's north of the Four Corners, there and then elsewhere. Thanks.
Neil Marcus.
Good evening, members of the board, distinguished council. I'm Neil Marcus, a member of the firm of Cohen & Wolf, PC at 158 Deer Hill Avenue in Danbury. I'm here tonight on behalf of Scott and Kelly McGovern. And I'm actually not quite sure why I had to be here this evening, but it was brought to my attention very late this afternoon that the agenda for this evening's meeting included 2 pieces of correspondence involving a zoning matter in which I'm representing the McGoverns. And I'm not sure why the zoning matter is on the correspondence with the Board of Selectmen, but I thought we should address it to make sure that the status of this case is understood. There's an email from Tara Carr to Laura Barkowski. Hi, Laura. I hope you're well. I'm curious to know where we are with the illegal dumping of the contaminated fill on Green Knoll Drive. Well, first of all, there was no illegal dumping. And second of all, the fill on Green Knoll Drive has been tested and retested. I will tell you that the tests that came through on the last round would indicate that that fill is probably cleaner than the dirt in your playgrounds in the town of Brookfield. It was an amazingly good report. So the fact that there's a letter on the agenda dealing with issues from the zoning commission concerns me, because that matter is about to head to the Superior Court. We're drafting a complaint. It'll go back as an appeal of the action of the commission. And then, of course, the response from Laura Bukowski indicates that the matter was discussed by the commission at its meeting on the 25th. Unfortunately, I was not available that evening. I wasn't aware that it was on the agenda. We have submitted to the commission through its staff a plan to address any prior orders of non-compliance, and we've gotten nowhere, obviously. But the indication is that the commission has started a citation process, and the fact that they've done that will result in an appeal, and the court can decide the appropriate resolution. So I'm here actually to offer to the selectmen, if it's actually a matter that you're going to take up, that we schedule it, and Mr. McGovern is here, we have an extensive file, and we discuss it. But I'm not sure why we would do that and why it's even on the agenda, and that's why we're here. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why it's there.
That's why it's there. Clarify.
Nadia Aniki.
Yes, Nadia Zanikliv, 16 Obtuse Rocks. I'm here to speak in opposition of the proposed tower, and I second everything that Austin already said, and wanted to bring a few more things to think about. Wanted to read a couple quotes from article and studies online. The first one is from Susan Foster, who organized a brain pilot study of firefighters who has been exposed to a cell tower on their station for over 5 years. And again, this is firefighters who were trained and tested before their jobs. So they found brain abnormalities in all firefighters who were tested. The symptoms experienced by firefighters who participated in the brain study were similar to firefighters in other stations who live in the shadow of cell towers. Yes, specific to the men we studied, she writes, it is important to note all men had passed rigorous physical and cognitive exams prior to being hired by the fire department. Their symptoms included headaches, extreme fatigue, cognitive impairment, anesthesia-like sleep where men woke up to 911 calls as if they were drugged, inability to sleep, depression, anxiety, unexplained anger, immune suppression manifests in frequent colds and flu-like symptoms. Real-life examples of these symptoms are best briefly characterized by firefighters got lost on 911 calls in the town they grew up on several occasions. So they got lost on several occasions. In one instance, 4 firefighters sent in a rig in a stupor with the alarm sounding in the background, unable to remember how to start the engine. A medic with 20 years of experience who had never made a mistake forgot basic CPR in the midst of resuscitating a coronary victim. And a few quotes from studies. One study who compared, so it's a study on mobile phone base station tower settings adjacent to school buildings. They were comparing 2 schools with different exposures. So the higher exposure to the radio frequency electromagnetic fields produced by mobile towers was associated with delayed fine and gross motor skills, spatial working memory, and attention in school adolescents compared to students who were exposed to low EMF. Another study says children living in higher radio frequency radiation exposure areas had lower verbal expression and comprehension scores, more internalizing and total problems, and were more likely to have obsessive compulsive and post-traumatic stress disorders in comparison to those living in areas with lower exposure. In another study, students exposed to higher cell tower radiation had significantly greater risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus relative to others exposed to lower cell tower radiations. Thank you.
That's it for public comment? Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll move on our agenda to our next item. Where's my agenda? Where did I put it? There we go. Right now, we're going to have a proposal by Colette Stern on the 988 sign proposal. Did we get the
I think so. Let me just.
video working? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna wait for it to come.
Where are we again?
We'll start while we do that. Good evening, everyone. Brookfield Cares is a nonprofit local community organization dedicated to creating awareness and positive change around the issues of substance misuse, depression, suicide, and other mental health concerns. We do this by actively engaging all members of the community to reduce harmful behaviors, destigmatize mental health, and promote and support healthy choices. So we're here this evening for a proposal for the design and installation of 988 signs, promoting the 988 helpline in areas around Brookfield where people in crisis might find themselves. So a little bit of background with that. In June of 2022, the National Suicide Hotline was switched over to the 988 helpline. This has many benefits to it. Number one, it's easier to remember just with 988. It also goes from just a suicide prevention line to a crisis helpline. So anyone who finds himself in crisis regarding suicide, depression, other mental health concerns, substance misuse, or any other crisis can call a line and reach a trained crisis counselor who will provide support, resources, and outreach and intervention. This has been also helpful because it does not involve 911 at all. So we do know that there are several people who are reluctant to call crisis helplines because they fear police involvement. In addition to that, this also frees up the 911 helpline to other things that might involve police intervention. There is also a veteran helpline regarding 988. If after 988 you press 1, you will reach the veteran trained crisis counselors. 988 is 24/7, and it's available via call, text, or chat. It is funded, or initially was funded, with federal dollars through the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, and it's administered through a large nonprofit called Vibrant Organization, or Vibrant Health. So what Brookfield Cares had noted is that in some of the shopping centers, the open-air shopping centers in New Milford and Danbury, there are 988 helpline signs posted underneath some of the directional signage. So when we contacted Vibrant, we found out that this was a partnership that Vibrant had with some owners of the open-air shopping plazas to have this 988 help sign to promote it. Unfortunately, when we reached out, there are no plans for any of the Brookfield owners of the shopping plazas to have this initiative and this partnership. But in discussing this with some of the police representation within Brookfield Cares, they noted that these helplines and signs would be of much more benefit, not in retail areas, but in areas where people in crisis find themselves, where the police are responding to sites where there are people in crisis. This tends to be in parks, trails, boat launches, schools, and other areas. We have Officer Mitch Heller here, who can speak later to the locations proposed, but he actually did propose all of these locations based on areas where police have responded or where people in crisis might be. You can see by the map that they do cover most of the entire area of Brookfield. In the initial proposal sent, you have a full listing of those proposed sites as well as photos of those sites as well. In all of them, but we believe one location, the signs will be able to be affixed to existing signage that is there. We're not sure if that's going to be possible at Hidden Valley. I think it is, so there might need to be an additional post put there. If you wouldn't mind scrolling to a few of the photoed sites afterwards. So again, these are just some of the proposed sites. You do have a listing in the initial proposal sent. One interesting thing of one site proposed, and this is the Lilanona boat launch. This is a site where the police a few weeks ago did their cold water ice rescue training. And they did find this, right, and Mitch took note of it and took a photo of it, that on the ramp itself, someone had written goodbye. Now, we don't know what that individual was thinking or what they were doing, but I don't think it's a tremendous hyperbole to think that there might have been something this individual was contemplating and perhaps self-harm. So as far as the signs themselves, would you mind scrolling back to the first slide that had the sign on it? I'm sorry, we should have put it at the end as well. There you go. The sign will look like this. It's going to be 12, or it's proposed to be 12 by 18 inches in size. It will be 63 mil thickness, which is almost the thickness that you get in the construction or road signs. Usually that is 80 to 125 mil thickness. But the 63 will still last 10 to 15 years, and we feel that is a very good investment in longevity. Where we did really increase the quality is in the reflectivity. There are 3 grades or levels of reflectivity in signs. You have engineer grade, then high intensity grade, and diamond grade. These signs are not going to be of help at all if they're not seen, so we will have them diamond grade. All design and creation of the signs will be covered by Brookfield Cares. The only thing the town would be responsible for would be affixing them to the existing signage. There are 3 sites that are not on town property. That's the Echo Bay Marina, the Aquarian North Station, and the Lilanona State Boat Launch. We have secured permission from all of those places to affix the signs as well. So we will at least be doing this for those 3 sites. I'm happy to open it up for any questions that anyone has. And like I said, Officer Heller is here if you have further questions about the locations proposed as well.
Can you tell us, I know you had a discussion with the police, what was their overall view on placing these signs and the efficacy of them, and what was their feelings about putting these signs up?
This was actually proposed by police representation in Brookfield Cares. Okay. So believing that this would be much more effective than putting them even in the retail centers, which is how the idea had started anyway.
And one of the thinking here, correct me if I'm wrong, is people who are in crisis sometimes call 911, but quite a few people will not call 911 because they don't want police involved.
Exactly, and they don't know where else to turn. Right. So if we literally have a 988 help sign there, we are hoping that we can, if not improve someone's life, actually save a life, and and the ripple effect of those surrounding that individual as well. I will also mention that this 988 helpline, when you call it, or text it or message, it is diverted to a local center. It's federal organization administered by Vibrant, but then it is run locally and funded state and local level. Connecticut is one of the top 6 states in the response of having the availability for local resources. In the past year, it's had over 93% of the calls, text messages
have been replied by a local center. And the reason that's important is because they have the local resources available to then help the individual. If it is bumped to a national center, which happens sometimes if the wait is going to be too long or if the resources aren't there, that individual is going to get help by a trained counselor, but they are not going to have the knowledge and availability of the local resources.
And where is the center in Connecticut?
That's a good question. I'd have to check. Like I said, it's funded by Department of Mental Health, Addictive Services, and also United Way. I think there are a few. I know they increased the amount of trained counselors since the initiation of the 988. And I also know that in the past year that I was reading, it was from June 22 to July 23, that the calls to what used to be the suicide hotline and then 988 increased by 62%. So clearly this, the 988 helpline is of benefit. Brookfield Cares is trying actually a twofold thing. We want to do an overall awareness campaign of the 988 helpline to have it out there, but first and foremost, and our immediate need is just getting that number to those that are going to need it the most.
Thank you, Colette. This is a really important initiative, so thank you for spearheading this. I have a couple questions regarding the signage itself.
Sure.
I thought you had mentioned that it was going to be affixed to signs that already exist, and I just want to make sure you're aware. Our new Parks and Rec director and I had started talking about doing a signage campaign to upgrade and replace some of the signs that are decades old across a lot of the locations you've identified. So I just want to make sure you're talking to Parks and Rec and the Conservation Commission about the sign upgrade program so that you're going to be part of that.
Sure. No, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Or maybe if this can be on its own pole or something, it might be a better idea.
And we're happy to provide the poles for it as well. We were just trying to create the least amount of work and the least amount of, clutter. But if there is a campaign to reduce that and streamline it anyway, then by all means, that needs to be a dialogue that happens.
Any other questions, issues? No. So I think that what you're asking for us for is for the Board of Selectmen to approve this?
Yes.
Placement of signs?
Mm-hmm.
I would make a motion that the Board of Selectmen agree to place signs in the locations that Colette has named. I think there's 14 or 15 of them on the list. On the list, this seems to make a lot of sense to me. And I would make a motion that we go ahead, if Brookfield Cares gives us the signs, then we will affix them and we'll coordinate with Parks and Rec and Conservation to make sure that we're not putting them on a sign that's going to come down.
I just would add to that, contingent upon approval of properties that are not in our control.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
So
they.
what you just said you
We've-
had, but
we've-
we can't approve
No,
it
no,
being
yeah.
placed in
No,
those.
no.
So it would be the
No.
town-owned property.
Town-owned properties.
Only on town-owned property. That's all we can approve. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just going back to the schools, what was the plan for the signage at the schools?
Signage at the schools, and Officer Heller, if you wouldn't mind coming up here to explain that as well. I think the main genesis of that is that usually those are almost best placed in the back, because that's where people are going to go if they are in crisis. But we can have.
Yeah, so. Yeah, so anytime,
You know what, you might have.
Could you come to the
You need the microphone because
please?
it's
Thank you.
televised.
Yeah, so the idea for behind the school, right? We can asphyxiate it somewhere on the backside of.
Could you tell us who you are so the public knows?
I'm Officer Heller, Brookfield Police Department.
Thank you.
We could asphyxiate it, on the backside of a building, on a standalone. There's a lot of places that we can put it on the back of the school. I don't think we narrowed it directly down in this proposal. We can do that if you guys approve it, but as long as there is signage somewhere in the back.
Okay. And we will coordinate with the schools to get their approval and sign off on where these are, right?
With history, we know people go back to places where they have memories, to contemplate, to think, to go in deep thought. That's really where all these locations. And on top of it, a lot of these locations, especially the boat launches, we've already had these unfortunate things happen. So.
Great. Thank you, Mitch. Any other question?
Yeah, I just don't want to restrict them to these locations, so.
No, I would say that if the police and Brookfield Cares finds other locations, that you just, well, we could amend the motion to say, we'd want to look at that though, I think, wouldn't we?
We'd be happy, if there are other locations that are identified, we'd be happy to bring them forth for
Come
further
before
approval
us
at that
again.
time.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and if you guys identify other places that where it's necessary, that we should not limit ourselves to putting them
Right.
there as well.
So for now, I'd say our motion is to put them where Brookfield Cares and the police department are recommending on town property, and that we coordinate with the schools for the locations where they would like to have them there. And in the future, if you find locations, you will come to the town.
Absolutely.
And we will discuss it. So that's my amended motion.
It's not really very amended.
I just want to make sure we get it right.
But it was clearer.
Yeah. Okay, so do I have a second on the updated?
I'll second.
Second. Any further discussion?
No, sir.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. for
Thank
that.
you all very much.
And thank Brookfield Cares for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Second on presentations, we have Ray Vergati from Homeland Towers who's going to make a presentation to the town about a tower that Homeland would like to put up.
Good evening, First Selectman Dunn, members of the board. For the record, my name is Ray Vergati. I am the regional manager at Homeland Towers. Some of you folks may know me. I had the pleasure of working with Steve on the cell tower here back in 2017 on the town campus. I've worked with Ms. Carr when she was first select woman. I've also worked with Attorney Beecher on the prior lease here on Town Hall. I brought boards, Selectman Dunn, but I'm thinking maybe between the overheads that Cynthia has up, we can just use those. Homeland Towers is a developer out of Danbury, Connecticut. We're the folks that simply build the infrastructure for the carriers, the likes of Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. Most recently, Dish Wireless is a fourth carrier coming into the state, into New England. I'm on my third tower here in Brookfield. There's been a need over the years. As I mentioned, I did the tower here on town campus behind the fire department. We recently stacked this past September on Vale Road, 60 Vale Road. We put up a 165-foot monopole tower. AT&T is in the midst of finishing their installation. The town has plans to install public safety there, and we have another carrier lined up discussing a lease with us. Been doing this business for 24 years. It's become critical infrastructure, just like sewer, electric, gas. I can't express how first responders rely on this. The carrier right now that has approached Homeland in concert to do this project is Verizon. Many times we'll work with a carrier directly. They have the need. They're the ones that have to prove the site, justify the site. From a zoning perspective, this does go through the State Siting Council out of New Britain. They go by the acronym of CSC. The CSC has been around vetting these tower applications since the 90s. If the town of Brookfield decides to host a tower on town property, it would go to your planning and zoning for a plan of comprehensive development. If they vote to approve it with an 824 referral, it would come back to the Board of Selectmen for a vote. We would have to go through the Siting Council for a very rigorous zoning process. It typically takes about a year. And during that process, they put the carrier to the test. In that case, Verizon, proving the need for the site, proving the height for the site. They'll test Homeland Towers, where we looked, why we think this is the best location, and so forth. And really, it needs to check the boxes. It has to be zonable, constructible, interested landlord to lease with commercial viable terms, and it has to work for the carrier's network. What I have before you, and I've been in correspondence since September, starting with Ms. Carr. We brought a proposal before the town in September for a tower here in the north section of Brookfield, specifically in the Long Meadow Hill Road area. Just like the tower here at town campus, I always give a municipality first crack on having the tower on their property. There's a benefit to it, certainly the revenue, but the ultimate benefit is going to have first responders being able to utilize this tower for public safety needs. I have spoken to Chief Ellis, your town's consultants for wireless. There's certainly a need in the north section of town. What I'll do is I'll just walk through some of the slides this evening. We have basically looked at the 62 Long Meadow Hill property. It's 18.5 acres. It's a vacant parcel. I guess my GPS or my laser doesn't work on here, but it does work on the screen here.
I think it's just the angle you have.
Yeah, I want to be able to talk into the microphone as well.
Nope.
It's anti-laser.
So I can certainly work off of this one in the back here. Bob, do you have a good angle to
Yep, I'm
see
fine.
that? Okay. So this is the 18.5 acre parcel. To get your bearings, we have north is facing this direction. We've got the high school across the street. This purple swath that you see coming through the center of the parcel, that is Hop Brook, that is wetlands. This is what's called a topography map. These lines are contours. If you look at this parcel, it's higher along the road here. It dips immediately down, very steep. The brook runs through the low point of the property, and then it goes back up to this particular area. We've looked at 4 locations, and nothing is set in stone. This is a proposal for the town to consider this, obviously. I would add that, you know, as part of my due diligence, I send out letters to interested property owners. We sent out, I think, approximately 30 letters. We had a number of people express strong interest. We're working on leases on 2 of those right now, but if the town wants to move forward, this is where the tower would go. I have 4 options I'm going to show on the screen here. This is what we're calling option A, and these are in no particular order. This is Hillendale Road. This is Long Meadow Hill Road. We are proposing a tower location just into the property here. All 4 squares that you see on the property are the compounds, which are 50 by 60. It's a lease area, and that's typically a leased area that's fenced in. It's for the carriers to place their equipment and so forth. We have an option A, which is right off of Hillendale with an access road coming in. We have a taller tower that's proposed here. Verizon is driving the height, and their RF engineers have preliminary told us that they need about 190 foot for this location. I believe actually 195. I don't pick the height. The height must be proved and justified during the siting council process. It won't go above 195 because when you do, you have to light towers, and we don't do that. It stands a chance it could come down. This is option, what we're calling A. We also have option B, which is directly across from the parking lot. This gray area is the parking lot of the high school. We're proposing an access drive coming in off of Long Meadow Hill Road, again to a 50 by 60 compound. This particular location, the benefits, we have some higher elevation, approximately 450 feet of ground elevation, AMSL. So we would need, or Verizon would need, a tower height of 160 feet, roughly 35 feet lower than this, because this location is 35 feet lower in ground elevation. So this, we have an A location, a B location. We also have a C location, which is further into the property from an access road. This is the C, again, it's a 50 by 60. This has the same elevation. You can see it's very close, not close in a sense, but it's down in the bowl to where the Hop Brook goes through. So we have a lower elevation of roughly 425, I believe, which is very similar in elevation to the A option. So we would need, again, keep saying we would propose a 190-foot tower based on Verizon's needs. The other location here is what we're calling option D. We're further up on the hill. A site here would need a facility in the height of 160 feet. So to kind of put it in black and white, we've got the A and the C needing a taller tower, and the B and the D needing a shorter tower, just because of ground elevation. I would like to point out, just some comments people make. The health and safety of it. This is vetted through the siting council. These towers are governed by the FCC. Everybody has an opinion, obviously. They've been around for 45 plus years. We go through a very rigorous environmental review by the siting council. They will task us if there's any slimy salamanders in the area. There was a comment that we were denied due to a slimy salamander. It's not true. I just built a tower in Coot Hill Road, 16 Coot Hill in Sherman, where we encountered a potential slimy salamander habitat. So we ended up moving the tower, I believe it was 180 feet. It was never built, it was during the zoning process. So the sign council takes their task very serious. They look at the health and safety, they look at the environmental impact, they look at the visual impact. This property has a lot going for it. You have an historic district that's to the south. And everything that we've seen so far is there'd be no impacting views to the historic district. But again, that comes out through the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office, Connecticut SHPO. They have a bite at this as well. We did also look at the high school property. We are challenged over here. We looked at a location behind a tennis court with Parks and Recs. We have wetlands there, and we have to cross wetlands to get to where we would need to be. And they use that particular area, I think, for running trails. And I know there's been some issues on development over there. This site works for Verizon. It works for Homeland Towers. We're hopeful the town would be interested in it. I would like to mention or add to the fact that this kind of ties in with our tower on Vale Road, 60 Vale Road that we stacked in September. AT&T, as I mentioned earlier, is in the process of installing their antennas on that tower. The town is placing 2 whip antennas on that tower, each 22 feet in height, one at the very top going from 166 to, I think, 188, and then another one at 90 going to, I think, 112 feet. And that's for public safety, for fire, police, and ambulance. Very important here. I work very closely with the town's consultants, with New England Radio Communications, Mr. Zito, as well as Eric Fine with Norcom, as well as the chief of police and with Andy Ellis, the fire. It's a very well-needed site. There's a rent involved if the town wants to go on that tower of $3,000 a month, because you're taking such a large footprint, not only on the tower, but on the ground itself, 10 by 20. In my correspondence with Ms. Carr and Mr. Dunn, I've said that if the town is interested in doing a lease here on this property, we proposed a monthly rent to the town of $2,000 or 25% of the gross rents that we take in. Extrapolate that over a 55-year lease, it's just around $4 million. What I'm willing to do or able to do as a developer is take the rental amount on Vale Road and reduce it by $2,000. So basically it would be $1,000 a month rent, and then the town would recoup the benefit of receiving the rent here. In my conversations with the town, it really is not a monetary issue, it's a public safety issue, and that's what's driving this. I'm happy to answer any questions. I would like to see some type of action, because this was brought to the town's attention mid-September with the proposal. We find ourselves now here in February, and no fault of the town. You went through an election process. We had holidays in there. But we're ready to go. Verizon's been patient. They're ready to go. They have funding for the site for this area. I think the next appropriate step would be to say, yes, we're interested in this. Let's send it over to the P&Z. If they vote to approve an 824, would come back to the Board of Selectmen for a vote. I would work with Attorney Beecher on a lease agreement very similar as we did in 2017 for the tower here on Town Hall.
Yeah, let me ask this question, Ray.
Sure.
If the town says that we're not interested, you are still going to pursue a tower on another property along Long Meadow Hill or in the general area, is that correct?
Yes, we, without giving any details, we have 6 landlords that came out that expressed interest. We're working with 2. They understand that this town gets first bite of the apple here. Same scenario kind of unfolded down on Vale Road. We approached the town first, and it didn't work out because of some wetlands back there, and the property is very tight, and we had to move a salt dome, and for future development, the town just took a pass, which is fine, and we went over to where the driving range is and just did a tower just on the other side there. So to answer your question, First Selectman, yes, if the town takes a pass, we're all set to go forward immediately on a private lease, on a private property.
And how far away from the school is that?
Without getting into specifics, I would say the 2 private properties are within a quarter mile of the school or less.
In your experience in building towers, you've been doing this 34 years?
24 years.
24 years, sorry, I thought 34. The Siting Council, when they look to approve a tower, obviously do take into consideration what the neighbors, how the neighbors feel. They try to find the least obtrusive site that they can find, that you can find, or ask you to find, if I'm saying that correctly, right?
Correct.
But in your understanding, has the siting council ever flat out turned down a location for a tower?
They've never turned down a site that Holman Towers brought, and the reason for that is doing this so long. When I do a lease with a landlord, I make sure I picked, in my mind, it needs to check the box for the least environmentally intrusive and the least visually intrusive. Those are the two top criteria. And the siting council puts us to the task. I have to testify before them. Mr. Vigati, why did you pick this particular property? Where else did you look? And I have to show a full alternate site analysis. There's a public hearing process for this. There's also a tech period with the town where the public can come and make comments for it, against it, indifferent. But that's in addition to the public hearing process that the siting council vets.
And we're interested, I think, in at least continuing to have these discussions. I'd like to give our residents a month to come back to us with their comments. This is the first time most people in town have seen this proposal. I do think we should, there's no harm in going to planning to talk to them. I'd like you to talk to them.
Sure.
Because there's no harm, no foul with having that discussion. And then the Board of Selectmen can look at this next month and get comment from the public. Have everyone write in or come in or visit us, give us your comment. And then if we wanted to move forward, because this is a contract with town land, we would have to have a town meeting to approve it. And that we would suggest for the following month if we decide to move forward. Is that a time frame that you can work with?
You know, I'd say no, but I understand this is something that's just being brought up before you as your first tenure here as first selectman. So yeah, I'm certainly able to accommodate the next Board of Selectmen meeting. I would ask in the interim if you could send it to P&Z. All it is them looking at it. Does it fit into your overall comprehensive plan, obviously? They would send it back to the board for a yes or a no.
Yeah, we would want them to look, our plan, it goes to our planning, we'd want them to look at this and
Correct.
give us an 824.
Correct.
And the longer they have to look at it, the better, in my opinion, right? And I'm sure you're willing to go talk to them.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and in their capacity as the planning board, they're not in the role of a true planning board, you know, putting it through the zoning process to say, well, you're X feet from the wetlands, or you don't meet a setback, or you're above a height. They're simply there to look at it. Does it fit into the overall comprehensive plan of development for the town of Brookfield?
Though, if I remember correctly, though, if anyone on our zoning board or our planning board or even residents have a concern about, hey, why is it here? Can we move it there? You're willing to entertain any suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I typically do not go into a lease with 4 options. We're doing that because it's a town property, and I'm not dealing with one decision maker here. Everybody has an opinion, obviously. So that's why we have presented 4 options on the parcel this evening. But yes, we're certainly open to people's comments, and we do it all the time. Some people sometimes have positive remarks to say, yeah, that does make sense. Let's do this to better the site.
Okay.
Well, where would the planning commission say it should go? Last time he was here, he showed us 5 or 6 other areas that they initially looked at, and now they've eliminated those, and now they're here, which are all way too close to the school. I don't understand what any of these other boards or commissions could do what is it we're asking them to look at?
Well, the planning would look at this proposal from Homeland and make an 824 referral to the Board of Selectmen, either saying, we think this is a good idea, it should move forward, or no, we do not think it's a good idea, it should not move forward, and for the following reasons.
So, Mr. Vergati, I think I heard you say that the siting council, which for the public, that the siting council is not an elected body. Let's just be very clear. They're a conglomerate. They work for big corporations that run the apparatus that gets put up on these.
That's not true. They're actually appointed by the governor.
Yeah, and they're not elected officials.
Yeah, but they're not.
And there's
they're
no
not
local
big business.
representation. So there's legislation going forward in this next session to actually have local representation from municipalities to speak on behalf of the people, because many, many towns across the state of Connecticut in particular are in the same situation we are, where they're just popping up everywhere and people don't want them, but the siting council trumps what you say, what I say. They don't care because they make money.
I think it's a very broad statement, say people don't want them. This is a necessity. This is public safety at its finest. These towers save lives. Don't let it kid you. Don't let it kid you not. These first responders rely on this critical infrastructure.
What you're telling us is that the siting council, I heard you say, looks at the health and safety, which is also very inaccurate. They do not.
They do. There's a health and safety report that's submitted, and these carriers have to operate well below the FCC thresholds. And they do. And people are amazed. People are amazed when they understand the science behind it, because everybody has an opinion with health and safety. You can find any report on the internet these days.
1996, and it has not been updated. And Senator Blumenthal himself asked for specific questions regarding the health and safety of this vis-a-vis human beings, and he still has not had an answer. And mum has been the word coming from him. I'd like to know from Senator Blumenthal if these things are safe for the public.
All I can tell you is that these are governed by the FCC, obviously. They've been governed since 1996 Telecom Act.
They were questioned.
And I don't go down the road of health and safety as a real estate manager, obviously. I leave that to the experts, to the scientists. I could spin an opinion all day long that these affect people. They don't, but they're opinions.
Yeah, everyone does have their opinion. You know, I think if there's a concern, I would call Senator Blumenthal's office and see where he is on that. I'm not aware of that.
Many people have.
I think what we've seen in the past, at least my experience has been, is that the siting council does hold the trump card. They just do.
Sure.
They do I've been through this once where Eversource was trying to enlarge their station off of Stony Hill. And they do a incredible amount of research in depth and forced, at least in that case, Eversource to provide tons and tons and tons of information. And we were, in fact, able to convince the siting council to force Eversource to change the location of their driveway and not put it off of one of our local streets, to go straight, use the driveway they already had off of Stony Hill. But it was an arduous process that we went through with the siting council. And I don't think they're just a rollover for industry.
No, absolutely
That's
not.
my experience.
They see these applications on a monthly basis. Yeah. They know what type of questions to ask of the applicants, primarily the developer, like Holman Towers, and the carriers. These 169 towns throughout Connecticut, some don't get in a wireless application 15 years. They don't know how to vet it properly. I go across to New York, it's a different story, it's local planning. But it's not a layup. We're not going into the siting council with the first property where somebody raised their hand, oh, I'd like a tower. No, we have done our homework. We have made sure that, like I mentioned, it's the least environmental impact, the least visual impact, a willing landlord, it's constructible. We think this property, due to the 18.5 acres, being it vacant, the backdrop, it's wooded, we think it lends itself very well for a facility. I wouldn't be speaking to the town tonight if I didn't think so. I would say, with all due respect, we're going with a private property. We feel is much better, and the town property is much worse. That's not the case. We think it's a very good property.
Do you know how much it costs us to just replace the new track at the high school?
I have no idea.
Almost $3 million.
Oh, it's the track and the field.
So you're telling us we're going to get $4 million over a 55-year period? I'm a hard no.
I think, my opinion is we should continue this discussion. The financial part of it isn't the most critical one, but it is an important one. It's a swing of $90,000 a year between expense and revenue. 90,000 over the life of this 55 years is $5.5 million in the total. That's not the primary concern on my part. Bob, do you have any concerns, comments?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So it strikes me that the question you're asking us is the town willing to lease one of these 4 locations?
Correct.
That's the question, right? It's not, are we going to put a tower in the northern part of Brookfield? That may be an issue of the siting council. The question is the town going to do a pass, or are we going to play? Isn't that the question?
Correct.
Okay. So if we're going to make a decision on, are we gonna pass or gonna play, right? I heard you, Tara, about hard pass. But I think there's some information we need on these 4 locations, right? I think we need to understand the financials. I think more,
I agree.
right? I think we probably ought to have a nice written document that we can all absorb. I think we ought to understand what the look of the tower in those locations would look like specifically, right? So for example, I'll focus on the one right next to Long Meadow Hill. It's gonna be a tower sitting right on the edge of the street, right? That's gonna have a look and feel issue for our town, and I think we have to think about that. And then lastly, with the proximity of the school, right, being that close, is that give us any health and safety issues, and what documentation can we be provided that it will or will not, right? Because I do think we had one member of the public here comment on it tonight. I'd like to hear more on that, right, before I would make a decision about putting something that close to our schools. I think with the planning referral, right, to get their opinion, because they're gonna be looking at the terrain and looking at that, we could make an informed decision, right? With, of course, input from our townspeople. Right? I think that's important. So to me, it's a mechanics discussion of, are we willing to play with these 4 locations, or are we gonna do a pass, right? If we do a pass, you know how to move forward with the other options.
Absolutely.
I am sure the public would love to know what those other options are, because sometimes the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and sometimes it's not. But I know you can't.
We try to make everybody happy with, but I cannot.
But I think we need enough information to make a decision here, right? I'm glad you actually brought it and put it on the table so we can actually make a decision, but I think we gotta take the time to get that information. Health and safety, what's it gonna look like, what's the financials, and input from the public. If we could do those 4 things, I think we could then make an informed decision.
I'm all set, but going back to public safety, you know, just to be clear, we just invested in a $6 million radio system upgrade, and Chief's here, I'm sure he can speak to this. It's my understanding that at the high school location, we're putting apparatus on top of the building, which is not cellular compatible, or I don't know the technological terms for these things, but it's not 4, 5, 6, 7G to come. It's not part and parcel of the cell tower structures, right? It operates off of a different system. So when it comes to public safety for the school, they have what they need there without any proposed cell phone tower.
That's not true.
That's what was.
The towns use typically radio for communications, fire, police, 2 radios. The first responders these days also rely on their cell phones immensely to get calls, for people to make calls, the public. When someone's having a heart attack and that ambulance shows up and it's driving to Danbury Hospital, it doesn't work off a 2-way radio system for public safety. It works off an internet connection, a wireless connection off a wireless network. That ambulance likes to have the connectivity to Danbury Hospital to send EKGs live, in process, what's going on. So when that patient shows up, at Danbury Hospital, they have a full EKG on what's happening during that transport.
There are, I think, parts of town, including like the Barkwood area, where the cell signal is not good enough to send in a EKG. That's what the fire department's told me.
Of course.
They have difficulty. We can,
We ought to hear from them.
Yeah, we should. We'll ask police, fire, and EMS to weigh in on this, to tell us what they think of an additional tower, and if they need that kind of coverage down in the Barkwood Falls area. That's what I've heard anecdotally from them, but we'll get that in writing.
And to me, at least, the single most important thing is there a health and safety issue for our kids in that school?
Yeah.
Right, and I heard what you said.
Sure.
I've heard what others have said. I'd like to hear more.
Sure. And I'll be happy to provide information to the board. I think the board will be amazed on how many wireless facilities are on school grounds or on school rooftops, inside churches, on daycare facilities.
But that doesn't
it's amazing.
Okay.
I just, again, I keep coming back to, we're making a decision about whether the town is gonna pass or agree
move forward.
or move
Yeah.
forward on this, and I think we just need to keep our attention focused on that, not the big broad issues, right?
I agree.
Of towers.
So on this, Tom, do we need to make a formal motion to get an 824 referral?
You do, whether tonight or at the next meeting.
I think, well, we could get the 824
need the
referral, and we don't have to do
You only
anything.
need the 824 back before the town meeting.
Oh, okay, so we don't have to do that tonight. Okay.
Yeah, but if we're gonna make a vote, I'd like
Yeah.
to get the planning commission's input.
Yeah, no, it would be
It's
well
sort of a
before the
chicken
vote.
egg thing, because I think planning's gonna say, well, which location
Yeah.
are we supposed to vet?
I don't think they'll look at it as an actual location. I may be wrong on that. I think they'll look at it as just a tower in this area of town. Does it fit in the comprehensive plan of development? We don't know
You might be
the,
surprised by this planning commission,
Yeah.
number one, but if I'm sitting on a planning commission, I wanna know whether it's in location A, right across the street from the school, or C, which is furthest away from the school, so.
Or they might say, of these locations, the planning commission thinks A is the most, or B is the most desirable.
they can certainly rank them.
Right. So I think I agree with you, Bob, that we'd like to get this to them sooner rather than
Is there a
later.
distinction between an 824 referral or just asking them for input?
There is a difference, yeah. We
What's-
could just ask them for input.
One's legally required.
Yeah.
Before the town
I
meeting.
think we ask them for input,
Okay. I'll do
analysis
that.
and input.
I'll do that, and then if we decide to move forward at the next
Then
Board of
you- then
Selectmen
you
meeting,
launch
we
the
just ask them
824.
for the 824, but we've given them the information now, so they're comfortable.
Because I
with
think the 824 as a legal document
It
is
is.
gonna need a specific location.
Yeah, okay. So I'll do that. Are there any other questions or concerns?
I just wanna make sure we give everybody a chance to be heard on this.
I agree. I
think
agree
this is really
100%.
important as a Board of Selectmen, and I know we spent a sizable amount of time last year. I watched a lot of those meetings on the tower on Vale Road and some of the input on that, and I don't think we need to repeat that, but I do think that, our townspeople need to be heard.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Especially
really
the,
important.
especially the people who live in the area. They're gonna be the most affected, right?
And I don't know how we let people in the area know, but we need to.
Oh, we can, we can send a note. Our systems can gather everyone within 500 feet and send them a letter. We could do
All the
that.
people down in Barkwood Falls will be dying to have a tower because they got no cell service down there, so.
There is some, I just know it's been spotty. That's Okay.
I've got family down there, let me tell you how bad it is.
Yeah, okay.
Usually the drive home, I'm going down the hill,
Oh.
I'll lose contact with you in a moment.
Okay.
Signal Hill?
Going down Signal Hill.
Yeah, okay. So I will send this to the planning commission and ask on an informal basis for them to give us their advice. We will go out to the residents, we'll go out on our town website. We want comment from public, we want comment from residents. I will go to the police, fire, and EMS and ask them to comment on whether they think this is something that we need and want, right? And then we'll.
And then we need whatever
regroup,
health and safety
whatever
information you
give
can
us the health
provide,
safety.
and then we'll hear from the public, who will also provide us some information, and I'd love any input of what it would look like at ground level or
Yeah,
height
that's
level.
I could see about, typically we do a full photo simulation package at site and council level, but I can see about doing some photo sims for the various locations.
So of the locations, the two that are down low, I'm less worried about because they're way set back from the road. It's the height that's of interest there because they're very tall towers. The one along the edge of the road, that worries the heck out of me, right?
Yeah, me
Because
too.
it's that we have a lot of people drive right through that space, so that's.
That would be my least preferred.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's just, we're giving the town options here,
Giving the
obviously,
options.
because
This
it's
is
a
off-
trade-off with
this
the
is
one,
about whether we want to play or not.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what we'll do.
Wonderful.
We don't need to make any motion tonight, but that's what we'll do, and then Ray, you and I will work together. If you can get those photo sims, health and safety, I'll go to the police, fire, and EMS, and planning, and then we'll plan to discuss this again.
Communicate with the public in that area.
Yeah, and have, hear from the public at our next meeting.
All
Ray,
right.
thank you very much.
fair enough. Thank you, folks.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate the time.
Okay. Announcements. Coffee with the Community will be held on Saturday, February 24th, from 9 a.m. to 10 at Chester's at 331 Federal Road. We again encourage people to sign up for the Spotlight newsletter and Everbridge emergency notifications at the brookfieldct.gov site. You can click on the subscribe option. We do have vacancies on our boards and commissions. Arts Commission, Board of Assessment Fields, Economic Development, Energy Advisory Board, Inland Wetlands Commission, Parks and Rec Commission, WPCA, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Zoning Commission. We urge everyone to go through, if they're comfortable, go through their local party, the Democratic Town Committee or the Republican Town Committee. If you're not or you're unaffiliated, you are welcome to come to the First Selectman's office and make application directly. We have to remember 43% of our residents are unaffiliated and they need a way to also participate. There was quite a bit of correspondence addressed to the board. We did get some correspondence after the close of business on last Friday. We will be adding that to the package, so anyone who wants to see that can see that tomorrow. Let me move on to monthly financial update. Marcia, would you give us an update, please?
You bet. Cynthia, can you start pulling up the registrar slides? Okay. So we've got transfers within the departments, intra-department transfers, and they total up $98,000 this month, with the biggest being within the police budget that we're trying to find money there. That there's a union agreement that we'll pay for grad school for the officers, and we normally put in 2 in the budget, and 4 officers are now going to grad school. So that needed some more money. They were able to find it within their budget. In addition, you'll see we have an awful lot of overtime and the overtime is high mostly because we have a lot of new people. We've been having a lot of turnover in the police, and it takes a year to gear somebody up, and the last part after they go to training, outside training, is that they are like a preceptor program where someone will work with them, but that takes overtime from other officers. And so we're trying to find where we can get that from, and that would be $58,000 that we're trying to move into the overtime line. Other than that, life, long-term disability, and accidental death and dismemberment, the policy that we had for that, for our retirees, was canceled. I'm sorry, that's the line. The retirees is their Medicaid line. That was canceled. There's no longer that same insurance. We got one that was most similar, but of course it costs more. So we'll need more money in that line, and we were able to take that from health insurance. So those are the biggest of the department transfers. In addition, there's about 45 others. Any questions on any of those?
I don't have any. Well, we've run over it. Tara? Bob, any questions?
So the police, you need, is that 93,000 all police, or?
No, 58,000 is trying to get more money into their overtime, and 15,000 is trying to get more money into their training line.
So you're gonna find that from where?
So we're finding that from other police lines. The 15,000 is non-payroll, and they were able to give me some of those lines to take it out of. The 58,000 is payroll, and we did an analysis of payroll, and we were able to take some from their officers' wages, the union wages from vacancies at the beginning of the year. We were able to take some from the first half of the holiday pay. They either get paid a holiday or they get to take the time off. And we budget as if they're going to get paid a holiday, but they didn't all do that. Some of them took the time off. And then, let's see, we had a little bit matrons and special officers. We essentially went through every one of their line items And we said, well, if this is what we've spent so far, and if we're going to spend for every payroll, the rest, kind of what we have in the budget, because right now we're fully staffed, what we have in the budget to fund that, these are the amounts that we would have extra.
So all of the additional expenses are being covered by other lines within the police budget, so overall, we're still within budget.
We're still within budget. That we're going to have to keep looking at it because they have the negative contingency, and if we've tightened everything else, that we may need to give them more money later. But for right now, we're still within budget and everything on the police side.
Good. Any other questions?
No.
Concerns? So I would make a motion that the Board of Selectmen approve the intra-department transfers for year-end 2024 as noted in the budget versus actual expenditure report. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You were an aye?
Yes.
That's 3 ayes. Okay, thank you. Then we move on to interdepartment.
Interdepartment transfers, going down in order, that we need more money from legal, that we did do a schedule of what we knew last month, and we've learned more, that the prior attorney sent us a bill from some time back in March of 2023 for work that they did and hadn't billed us for. Plus, we had a bill from an appraiser for a case that's now been closed, so we need $6,200 there. There's a bill out there from the attorney for a bill from September of 2022 that we need more money there. That labor legal that we had spent in the first few months, quite a bit of the money, and this would bring it up to 50% for having 50% of the bills in, so we have room there. Pension legal, there was some issues with the data in the files that some people couldn't see their pension information, and one person had time in particular. So we tried to fix that information and get all the data in there, but they've spent a significant amount of time and will have to bill us for that time, and they said that they don't expect it to be more than $5,000.
Who is they?
This is Milliman that works for Empower.
Reed and Reach, right?
This is Milliman, and they're the back office of Empower.
Okay, okay.
So that was a function that Ms. Simoniak used to take care of, is that correct?
That this wasn't taken care of, and that's why it's being taken care of now.
Because they switched to Empower, and Empower was all messed up.
I don't know the cause of it, I just know that we're trying to clean it up.
Next, on the registrars, we want to have Bob, he's been doing a lot of work with the registrars because we had some budget issues there. I'll let Bob explain it, but he's done a really good job of digging in and understanding what's going on. Are you okay?
You want to jump to that now?
You okay with that? Move to that?
Yep, Cynthia's pulling it up.
Okay.
So who put this together?
I did. Well, let me explain. So, I've been working with the registrar, before I get into the charts themselves, I've been working with the registrar's office now for a year on various topics. And soon after the election, Steve asked me if I would spend time with Dottie. And of course, we went through the change with Mel stepping away and Kathy coming in to help them both with really doing a deep dive on the current year budget and also looking at the next year's budget. I've done a couple of charts here, and they've been reviewed by both registrars before I brought it forward. So this isn't me operating separate from them. They will overrun their budget this year, and I'm going to explain that, and I hopefully after the couple of charts, you'll understand. It's about almost $17,000. That does not, that only includes a single budget referendum this year. So if there is another budget referendum, that will be an incremental expense. So what are the reasons that they're seeing? The deputies, which are I'll talk a little bit about what deputies do on the next chart, will overrun by about $7,800. There was a negative contingency placed in their budget by the Board of Finance of $9,000 that we will not underrun by $9,000. I'll show you why. There is some additional cost when you change registrars. It's about $1,600 of training sessions. It's 16 $100 sessions required by the Department of State. We agreed that we were not going to get them all done in the current year, so let's get the first 8 of them done, and then we put the other 8 in next year's budget. And all the other items are pretty dead nuts to what we expected. None of this includes early voting, which it starts with the presidential primary, which is a 4-day early voting, and we have as you know, a grant from the state to cover the cost of that, and I think we will stay well within the cost of that grant. The piece of work I need to do next with them is to actually look at the staffing of that, including what the town clerk may or may not be able to do, and figure out how much of the $10,000 grant that we received we would be able to use, and how much we could flop over to perhaps the next fiscal year. So that the net of the analysis is they had to take some actions. First is freezing the hourly staffing in January. Basically, we turned off completely the hourly workers in January. It's starting to back up some of the things that needed to be done, so we agreed that we would limit the hourly staffing to 4 hours weekly for assistants and 9 hours weekly for deputies. And that is not, it's been going quite a bit more than that over the last about year and a half. So that's a pretty tight schedule. There are some needs around the peak weeks around elections, both before and after. So there's a little bit of room to, to ramp up to create the books and get the staffing organized. And that's mostly on the deputy side, not the assistant side. And then with Marcia's help, we've really implemented a very tight purchase order process to make sure that we track all the non-labor related items. So let me go to the next chart and talk a little bit about deputies and assistants. Deputies, I've learned, they are basically have to step in when the registrar is not available, but they also do a lot of close work with the registrars in terms of updating the computer records, managing the computer records, organizing the staffing for election events, dealing with all the unique situations. And in this year, number 1 is the early voting, but number 2 was organizing the primary, and we had an audit and dealing with the canvas that's coming up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the canvas.
We had 2 audits, didn't we?
We had 2 audits, but they were about the same time. We got selected for 2 different audits, and they were both in the fall. They also actively work on town meetings, registration drives, which were required by the state, and as you come up on elections, supervised voting. We have a couple of instances we actually have to go into places that need voting. They don't go to the voting places, so like in, for example, retirement homes and the like. And the like. So there's a bunch of tasks that the deputies are very, very important in driving. The assistants are more about filing paperwork and mailings, right? So when we have a number of those that happen, so when you get stuff, for example, from the Department of Motor Vehicles, we have to make sure it gets filed with each individual voter's information. So they're really much more measurable in terms of, is there a backlog of things that need to be done, and that's why we agreed we had to limit that way down to just 2 hours a week per each of the 2 assistants. We do have other situations where hourly workers are used. And some of them are the same, because you might have a team of people going out and doing a town meeting. You have 2 or 3 people running a town meeting check-in. You might have multiple people out on the registration drives and so forth. So, and we did use hourly workers on the state audit. They show up in the same bucket as the assistants and the deputies.
Are these hourly wages based on minimum wage?
Yeah, they're currently at minimum wage.
And are other towns in our cog or county all using minimum wage?
I don't know. That's the next thing I'm gonna work on, Tara. I've only been able to do a little bit about the two things I have to work on to do are go after a salary survey, because this should be the easiest salary survey we do.
Salary survey?
Yeah, exactly.
Say it isn't so.
But in this case, the roles are defined by the state, so every town should have a schedule that says this is, we know what the roles, they're all defined the same way. It ought to be able to do that, and I've agreed with them that I will take the lead on doing it. Marcia's been able to pull some information from the state, which I will use as a base and then go on from there. These employees are at minimum wage right now, and I believe from the preliminary stuff that I've seen that the other area towns are not at minimum wage, they're above minimum
what I'm
wage.
tracking as well.
So I've gotta sort through that. If you look over on the right-hand side, I will give you a sense of the hours. Now, first of all, I just gotta start. All of the hourly workers in the registrar's office add up to less than a half a PY. Right? This is not, we're not talking about a big staff. We're talking about 900 hours a year, roughly, that we're talking about here. And that's a full person is about 1,800 to 2,000 hours a year. So that's about a half a PY. The average hours for the deputies was a little over 400 hours a year. And for the assistants has been running 600 hours a year. You might say, why are the assistants running so many hours? Well, it's usually these things called canvases, right? Where you actually get information from all sorts of sources. You have to send out mailings to people, and you have to go find out. So somebody who's moved, because you got a national change of address form, you have to send them a letter, you got to follow up, and that's usually the assistants are doing it, because it's a lot of mailing and paperwork follow-up. And so when you look at the averages, I actually looked by month over the last 4 years, and that seemed to be the driver. This year, the registrar proposed 960 hours, 480 for the deputies and 480 for the assistants. The budget that got approved was 400 some odd hours, so a lot less than the registrar asked for, almost half. And that's part of why they're gonna end up overrunning. They are not gonna get as high as what the registrar had proposed, and they're not, because of the controls we put in, but they're definitely not as low as what's in the budget. We are over the budget year to date on the deputies. And most of that is driven by the audits and the caucuses that we, the primaries that we had to deal with this year, because they consumed a lot, even the caucus consumed a lot of hours to try and sort through, because it was a kind of an interestingly challenging caucus. And you can see a little bit of it, so actually the hours are a little higher on the Republican side than on the Democratic side in terms of the deputies, so I just put that on there. So, and I put down on the bottom, what are the drivers for it? So if you take that year to date and you put limited hours on the to-go basis, that's how you get the outlook that I put together for the current year. It's about $7,000 to $8,000. I want to show you the next chart, and then we'll get quickly. This is I'm sorry. There's a thing in the budget for negative contingency. The Board of Finance added a $9,000 negative contingency to the budget, and they did it for very logical reasons. The blue has been the budget for this organization for the last 4 years, and at the time that they put the budget in place, you can see the orange, the 2 years where they had actuals, they had been well below, right? So if I was on the Board of Finance, I would have done the same thing, put a negative contingency, because obviously you don't know how to predict it. But go to the next chart and you'll see exactly what was going on. What I was able to do was restructure the registrar's budget into things that are related to kind of fixed cost and office type activity and election events. Focus for a moment on election events. If you look at the election events, way down on the bottom, they budgeted for 4 election events in 2021 and only had 3. They budgeted for 4 election events in 2022 and had 2. They had budgeted for 4 in 2023 and had 4, and this year they've budgeted for 4 and have 4. So those big underruns, which I've highlighted in the green, were all driven by the fact that we had fewer election events than we had budgeted. So part of the science of doing this, and when I went into the budgets, I found out they always budgeted for 4 election events. Every year they carried it forward from year to year to year to year. So it was a logical budgeting thing, but it wasn't exactly what was going to happen. And the election event is like between $15,000 and $19,000. It looks a little low in the second year here, but it was because it was only 2 events, and referendums are your cheapest election event in terms of staffing and the memory cards. You can see the makeup, by the way, of the election event. The workers is a piece of it, but you have to print ballots, you have to manage the memory cards, you have some technical supplies that go with it, and you have signage that has to go on with the polling place. So that's what makes up an election event. If you scroll up to the top part, which is the office and fixed events, you can look at the deputies and assistants line. You can see they've been over every single year, because what's been happening is we've been carrying forward an under budgeted situation for a long period of time. They haven't staffed to what was in the budget for as long back as I could see. So we've been having the same phenomena we're seeing this year. We've been having the last couple of years, but it's been masked by the underruns and election events. And so as I kind of went through it, and we did a bottoms up on the hours this year, they're going to spend close to that $15,000. Now you ought to know in there at the year when you're having a presidential, you have to do this big canvas. Dottie tells me they usually run 600 hours to do that. We only have 100 hours for it in here, incrementally, because the 2 registrars have agreed they're going to try and do as much of it as they can, from their own computers at their own home for the computer room. And so we've got a little risk in here that it may go a little higher than that, but I'm going to try to help them as we go through that, through the process.
This is good work.
Yeah. So on the last chart, just other items. The coursework, there were $1,600 classes. I mentioned that. We've got 8 of them this year with a new registrar. As a point, we will have another new registrar next year, right? Because Dottie will retire, she tells me. And the Democrats will have to name both parties have to name a new registrar of voters. And the way that process works is that the whole process starts this summer, and it's on the presidential ballot, and the new registrar takes office after the presidential election in the early part of 2025. The canvas I mentioned, and I just put a little more information here. They get information from all sorts of sources, like the National Change of Address Registry, real estate registries, voter registration clearinghouses, and we actually in the budget have a person who we pay to do a lot of the data work to get us who do we have to contact, but then it's all about follow-up and updating your records. And the way that works is if somebody isn't on you can't confirm somebody, found something that says somebody moved, you put them into inactive, right? So they have to come to the polling place and prove that they still are in Brookfield for some reason, else they can't vote. So. And we do, of course, have a potential for a 5th election event this year. We thought it might have been a BRTC primary, but that's not going to happen. So only the risk of that is what happens with a budget referendum in July. And that one I expect would be another $15,000 if we have it. So that's a deep dive I did. So when I met with Marcia, from what we know, we really do need to do some budget adjustments to give a little bit more funding here. Board of Finance is going to also have to approve this, so I will do the same presentation with the Board of Finance. And I urge your support of this.
And I want to thank Bob and the registrars. The registrars wanted to be here tonight, but they couldn't.
Well, we have the deputies here.
Okay, sorry, they're behind the podium. That they all spent quite a few hours, lots and lots of hours to go through this and to try and get it right for us. And not only did they do this year, but they've done next year's budget as well with the same level of detail. So we're looking for transfers within the registrars. You'll notice my numbers are a little bit different than Bob's. His numbers were based off, we end up at the same place, but we had some interim adjustments as we went along there. So, and his doesn't consider the interim, so we end up the same place. Employee benefits, we want to take $35,000 out of health insurance. That's because we've had some vacancies and we had more ARPA reimbursements than what we had expected. Police wages, that we want to take money out of there, and I did talk to Chief Puglisi about this, that we're not actually taking money from him. But when we did last year's budget, we thought we would have X number of dollars. Let's say it's $100,000 left in the ARPA funding that paid for half a police officer. We thought we'd have $100,000. By the time we got to the end of the year, we had $147,000. So more of their wages will be offset with ARPA, which means less of their wages will have to be paid with tax dollars this year. So that's, we're taking that out. Highway, we've had a number of vacancies there, so we've had some savings in the union wages. Town utilities, we need more money in hydrants. Last year they gave us their annual rate letter, which we'll get probably this week for next year. And it was dropping our rates, and that was pretty exciting. But there was a lawsuit, and so that we follow their rate letter, that they couldn't actually make the change. The lawsuit is still active, still out there, and they're still fighting it. I did ask if you win, do we get it retroactive? And no, we do not. So we'll need more money there. And we're taking out more money out of budgets than we need in other places. So we would put the difference in the contingency that we could use at some other point with an approval of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. Any questions on those transfers?
On the health insurance, you have vacancies. Can you just elaborate on that, and what exactly does ARPA reimbursement mean there?
So the ARPA is the same as the police. We had more money than what we had expected, and some of the ARPA for the police officers covered wages, and some covered health insurance. We had the vacancies in the police department, you see it in their wages. The vacancies in the highway department, you see it in their wages. Nobody was getting paid in there as we switched from one employee to another employee. And there was also a time period when, let's say, highway worker number 1 wasn't getting paid a wage because highway worker number 1 left, and it took 2 weeks to fill it. There would be a time where nobody was getting health insurance.
So that $35,000 is a total for several people, or is that?
Yes, it's a total of everything. I took what we've spent year to date. I've taken the health insurance from here to the end of the year, and scheduled that out on how much we would pay. It's the premiums, it's the withholding from the employees, it's how much the Board of Ed reimburses us. And so that's the total for everyone combined.
Okay. Any other further questions, concerns, issues? So, not hearing any, I would make a motion that the Board of Selectmen approve the interdepartment transfers through the year-end 2024, as noted on the budget versus actual expenditure report, and forward it to the Board of Finance for their consideration and approval. Do I have a second on that?
A second.
Since I did half the presentation, I probably ought to hold off there.
Thought you were sleeping,
Yeah.
Bob.
Nope, I'm
No,
gonna,
you can second your own good work.
no, but I'm gonna abstain from
Yeah.
from the vote, if you guys are okay,
Okay.
just because I did a big piece of that work,
Okay,
and I just
that's
think it's
fine.
the right thing to do.
That makes sense. So I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So 2-0 with one
Abstain.
abstention. Bob?
All right, and you have a number of other reports that just giving you the year-to-date status, none of them asking for you to do anything at this time. We try to do it on a quarterly basis. You'll have the capital non-recurring, that's the cash capital and where that stands. Nothing in any of these reports is alarming or surprising. That you have the ARPA fund and where that stands. You have the bonded capital fund and where that stands project by project. You have the revenue budget, and we had to cut it off. Usually at the end of January, I try to project the tax revenue to the end of the year, but to make it in time for the agenda for this meeting, I had to cut it off before the tax collections were done. So we'll be able to do that next month. And you have the Police Outside Service Fund, which we're going to try to start doing that on a quarterly basis for the police, and we'll share it with you as well.
I did have a question on the green one for the ARPA. That building conditions study that we did, can we get a copy of that, Steve?
Yeah, I don't even have it yet.
The one for the school?
Yes.
For the schools? Yeah, I will ask the schools for that. Let me write that down. It's a good idea.
Thank you.
It's thick.
Yeah,
I
it
do
is.
believe it's
Sure
on
it
their
is.
website, but
Yeah, it is on the website.
Okay.
It's on the Board of Ed website?
Yep.
Oh,
Oh,
well, that makes it easy.
I'll
And
ask for a
everybody
copy and
can
send
see
it to
it.
you anyway. Okay. Our next item is a consent agenda. So I would make a motion that the selectmen approve items A through F on the consent agenda, which includes Board of Selectmen meeting minutes for 1/8/24, 1/27/24, the driveway bond release, one excavation bond, zoning commission bond release, and employee changes and new hires of Nicholas Fusco as a full-time dispatcher, Alfonso Damasi, temporary part-time courier, and resignations of Jamie Murphy, full-time dispatcher, and Kevin Mooney from full-time dispatcher to full-time, he's moving from full-time dispatcher to full-time deputy fire marshal effective today. So we wish him luck on that. Do I have a second to approve those items?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yeah, actually,
sorry.
on item 8B, it was brought up that there was some errors in the minutes from.
Okay. What did you have? What changes? You want to make a change?
Yeah.
In which one?
It was, well, two things. I have a question on, is that number now for the Brookfield Volunteer Fire Company reimbursement for the ambulance, is that correct in the minutes?
I'm sorry,
I didn't
where,
have a chance to compare it against what
which
we-
day are you talking? You're talking
I'm
about
talking
the
about
actual board?
item 8B for the minutes of the 8 January meeting.
Okay.
I think that's right now. I think at our meeting, the agenda said $1,113 or something like that, so.
Yeah, I remember the discussion. Mr. Saluga had brought it up. It's in the minutes. It's on the first page, Steve. It's
Yeah.
under the Brookfield Volunteer Fire Company reimbursement. Remember there was that confusion about the $10,000 prepay, right?
They had put a $10,000 deposit on this a while back. Then when they asked for reimbursement from the town, they didn't ask for that 10,000.
Yeah, so the issue that raised, and you can see it in the minutes, it was
Right.
$317,000 is what they asked the town for.
Right.
And that already was netted for the $10,000 deposit.
Right.
The budget was 316, but that led to a delta of 11,000, and it just doesn't jump out at you why
Right.
that is.
Right.
So it would be either we should note that that $11,000 includes the repayment of the $10,000 deposit plus the $1,100 delta,
Yeah.
or we should change the total to 327,113 because that's the amount that would have been you know, if they hadn't paid the deposit, right?
Right.
There's a cash transaction versus an expense transaction, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, I think the thing was they had asked for a budget of 316.
Yep.
Forgetting that they really needed
I agree.
327.
But we
So-
fixed that in what we approved.
We
I think it's a
did.
clarity in the minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and what I would
Alright.
suggest is we amend the minutes just to say the 11,113 includes the, you know, 1,113 as, you know, seen above, plus the $10,000 prepayment that they had made.
I would be fine with that. Are you okay with that?
I just want to make sure it coincides with what we voted on at.
Yeah,
the
it does, yeah, all
It
that's
does.
what we talked about,
Yeah.
so. In fact, these numbers are exactly what we talked about.
They are.
Right, so and it was just confusing even at the time, and then why was it 11
Well, I
instead
think
of
there
1?
was an error on the agenda. The 11,000 wasn't spelled out. It was like 1,100 or something.
It was
remember?
weird, it was
Yeah,
weird,
it
right, so,
Anyway,
and it-
as long as it makes sense and it is what we said.
It is.
Okay, and then the other issue on
And
the
I want to thank Mr.
agenda-
Saluga for continuing to point it out. So we'll make one motion with any amendments to the minutes, but that's the one.
Um,
What else did you want to
The other item was Mr. Saluga, I believe, that brought it up as well about the discussion held regarding the termination of the HR director, which we did not have, so that's inaccurate.
We did not have a discussion on it, that's correct. We had a discussion about whether we should have a discussion, but we didn't have a discussion about the specifics.
Yeah, so that should
We
really
should
say.
have had a discussion.
A discussion was held.
I just delete that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because no actual discussion was held. Do you agree?
Right, which is unfortunate because we should have had the discussion.
Okay, so do you want me to make a motion for both of
Sure.
those? All right, so I'll move that on the point on Brookfield Volunteer Fire Company reimbursement for ambulance, that we put an additional sentence that outlines that the $11,113 balance is made up of $1,113 on the difference between the estimates plus the $10,000 prepayment that had been inadvertently excluded.
Left out.
Right, and that we also, secondly, that we strike the comments under discussion for employee dismissals, that a discussion was held.
Right. That we strike the entire sentence.
To strike the entire sentence.
I will second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anything else you noticed or wanted to change, Tara? In
And nothing
the
else on the
consent?
consent agenda.
Okay.
The temp PT courier was that individual already an employee or had worked for the school board before?
I do not know if they've worked for the school board before, have they?
As a vendor, not an employee.
As a vendor, not an employee. If you remember, our person got hurt in the parking lot and she's gonna be out for a while. Hopefully, we wish her well and she will come back. Okay. So then, we made a motion, right?
There's a motion on the table, correct, to approve the consent agenda.
To approve the consent agenda with the changes. Got a second, right?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye with the amendment. Okay. The additional monthly item agenda. So on our appointments, this is a month where we appoint a lot of boards and a lot of staff. And Bob has been kind enough to work with all of the boards, working with them to make sure that board members do want to remain on their boards or leave their boards. And so he's going through it. I'm going to let Bob walk through this because he did this as an exercise for the Board of Selectmen. I thank you for doing that.
Okay. So there are a couple of changes from the printed version, Tara, that you have, because as I went through it versus my detailed notes, I found a couple of oopses. So I'll correct them as I go, but I'll let you know what I'm correcting. There's not very many, so. So the first category is reappointments for 4-year terms with the term of February 5th, 2024 tonight through February 7th, 2028. And I'm just going to go down these quickly. And these are all individuals who, I worked with the committee and commission chairs and asked them to contact each of their committee members to see if they had an interest in continuing. So these are all just reappointments. Arts Commission, Barbara Bloomberg, Gary Bloomberg, Carrie Colombo, Anne Marie Harding, and two that are not printed, Tara Peterson and Patrice Young. And those were my typos that I had forgotten when I cut and pasted.
What are the affiliations?
Tara is a Democrat and Patrice is a Republican.
And what is Patrice's last name?
Young, Y-O-U-N-G.
Thank you.
Okay. On the Board of Ethics, Alice Carolyn and Christine Hand. On the Commission on Aging, Kevin McCaffrey, Elaine Tomanio, and Astrid Chiavelli as an alternate. And please, Astrid, forgive me if I mispronounced that.
Chiavelli?
Chiavelli.
Conservation Commission, Jeffrey Braun, Tony Capiello, and Marjorie Carmody. Economic Development Commission, Angelo DeCuna, James Fisher, and Peter Girardi. Historic District Commission, Kevin Archer, Robert Brown, Harold Proudfoot, and Tamara McMahon Schreifer as an alternate. The Hart Transportation Authority Board, it's a town representative, it's Maureen Farrell. She's been having that and will continue. The Inlands Wetlands Commission is Sharon Fox and Robert Hudeman, who's a Republican. It wasn't noted on there. The Library Board of Trustees, Valerie Annis, Christina Cumberton, Jesselie Pineda, Casey Sarmier, and Sue Slater. The Municipal Building Committee, Joshua Flowers, and Colette Sturm I'm deleting, and I'll explain that when we get to the new appointments. Parks and Recreation Commission, Robert Blick, Edward Butt, Tom Murphy, Brian Chanowski, and Chanowski is an alternate. It's not noted on the list. I'm skipping the Planning Commission for a moment. The Police Commission, Robert Lavelle, Raymond Murphy, Nancy Power, Mario Nasinovich as an alternate. The Water Pollution Control Authority, Loretta Donovan, James Murray, and Louise Trojanowski Marconi. The Youth Commission, Ernesto Davila, Liam Ania, and Ron Jaffe. The Zoning Board of Appeal alternates, Larry Rushmeyer. And I'll just pause there. That's the 4-year reappointments. There's a reappointment for a 3-year term from today through February 1st, 2027 on the Candlewood Lake Authority, but for Mary Ann Gaffey. Then some others which had odd terms, and I'll explain each of them. The Youth Commission non-voting student members reappointed for today through 8/31/2024. That's a relatively short appointment because our new charter revision said we have to get on a cycle where they're appointed at the beginning of each school year. So in meeting with the Youth Commission leadership, they said, let's just reappoint them for the stub of this year, and they'll bring us a full proposal for our action in the summer. These 4, Ava Cantone, Vanessa Greenstein, Kayla Zimmerman, and Peter Suarino, are existing members of the Youth Commission. They've brought forward in new appointments some additional students to get up to their total of 7. The Lake Leelanau Authority, Mauro, oh my God, I'm going to screw this one up. Mauro De Girolamo. There you go. Through 2020, today through 2020, February 1st, 2027. Kristen Lee, today through February 3rd, 2025. And Vincent Young, today through February 2nd, 2026. This is an interesting situation in that the charter has them on 3-year terms that have to be staggered with one person coming up for re-election each year, right? So there's one new re-elected. For some reason, reappointed, right? Or newly elected if they step down.
Oh, true.
Or if they step down. For some reason, all 3 of them had terms that were ending today. So we had to appoint one for 1 year, one for 2 years, and one for 3 years, and I worked with them, and we'll get back on the proper cycle for appointments on that. And then the Retirement Benefits Advisory Committee, with Scott McCarthy and John Lucas. Scott McCarthy, his term expired on January 1st for some reason, so it doesn't change the end date, but it started on January 1st. And John Lucas, who is on that commission because he is an elected treasurer, it coincides with his term as treasurer. So, and then on top of that, and well, you had skipped it before, the Planning Commission alternates, Aga Stepniak. It's because we're going through a change of planning and zoning to a planning and zoning commission, upon advice of council, we should just reappoint from 2/5 from today until December 1st, 2025, when that new commission structure will take effect. And then we will appoint the new alternate structure when the new commission takes effect. So AGA would be appointed from now until the end of 2025, or till December 1st, 2025. Okay, so that's it for reappointments.
So what would be helpful, and just a couple of things, thanks for doing this work too, Bob, but the sheet that Cynthia and formerly Ginny had maintained on all these appointments, and we had looked at going to an electronic system.
Yes.
I forget the name of the database,
Yeah.
but I think that would be hugely helpful, and it
Let
would have been helpful.
me
to
tell you
see.
what, it will be great, because, trying to trace through all the records on these things is crazy.
Yeah, we're gonna continue to do that, but we had to get it clean.
Oh, good. All right, but
We're building it out now.
I think, because I'd like to see an updated, where we are with everybody on,
Yep.
if you could just, I don't know, maybe.
Well, I'm still maintaining the original list, but we're building out the onboard so that we would be able to run a report before each meeting so that we would have all of that information. So it's in the process, but I'm still maintaining the original. So I'll send that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
So when we're finished, we will put that together for all the boards, particularly this one. Then you can have a chance to review it again. Are the dates right? Are the names spelled right? All of those sort of things. I agree with you. It's nice to have it
Just
in
to
one
see the
place.
full picture as
Yep.
well,
Yeah.
because there's more people on these commissions than are listed here.
There are, I agree with you. Yeah, these were just the ones up for reappointment. There are other people whose terms go into 2026 in general. Some a little different dates, but most are 2026.
Okay, so do we want to make a motion for that? So I would make a motion that the selectmen reappoint all of those people that Bob just mentioned and are listed here as for the dates and for the committees that were discussed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion?
So, just to be clear, you did go back to all of the chairs to say, yes, these people want to continue to serve?
Every single individual here has been confirmed that they would like to continue. There were a number of people who actually are not continuing.
Yeah.
Moving to Florida, retiring from public service, and so I've been providing that to the first selectman's office so that we can update those sheets as well.
So those will now be vacancies?
They will
or-
become vacancies.
They will
That's
become
correct.
vacancies, and then we'll report them at the next Board of Selectmen meeting with the boards, the number of positions available. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a
So
second.
let me just pause.
Oh,
So this
I'm
was
sorry.
what I was using, Tara, to track you, if you wanted to take a look at it. You can see over on the right, that's the same information, but on the right, I showed what is left in terms of vacancies, and you can also see the column just before that of who's actually stepping down, right? And by the way, we should thank the people who are stepping down for their service.
And everybody who serves. I mean, a lot of these people have been doing this for a very long
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, there are people who've been doing it for years and years and years and years. That is true.
Yeah,
Okay.
this would be very helpful for the town committees as well to understand.
Yeah, we'll either
What's
update
what?
this or on the new system, get the report and see if it creates what's available, what's open. I don't know if that system does it? So we can create that report and just send it to everyone and just put it on the town website also.
Yeah.
So people can see. Because we had a gentleman come Friday who wanted to apply for the zoning board of appeals. The only a problem is, he's of one party, and that party is completely full in both members and alternates for that board. So we'll keep his name.
Yeah, we gotta get him maybe guided to something else then.
Yeah, right now, he doesn't want to do that. He wanted zoning board of appeals. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second for
I'm
this
sorry,
appoint-
just, so you mentioned about the municipal building committee, you were gonna come back.
You'll see it in the recommended motions just below this.
Those-
I'll come
Yeah, we're
back to
gonna
it.
go to those next.
Also,
It doesn't say MBC on there, but we will.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So it'd be good to have like this side by
Yep.
side to what she maintains to see who's
Yeah, that's
doing
what, by the way, if you look at my little clipboard, you can have that if you want.
Thanks.
If you look at my little clipboard, that's exactly what I was doing, because I have her sheet and I have that sheet, going side by side, just so I could keep track of it.
Okay.
It's like a
Okay.
jigsaw puzzle in some ways, so.
It was a lot of work, thank you, Bob. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of these appointments, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Carries 3-0. Okay, Bob, we're gonna move on to other appointments.
Okay, the next two, and Tara, you will see me change the name of the board. There was a typo in the thing. That should be Municipal Building Committee. Ed Bossio and Colette Sturm are currently alternates on the Municipal Building Committee, and they have two of their regular members who are stepping down after long service. So Mr. Checo is requested that we make motions to take Ed Bossio and Colette Sturm and make them regular members instead of alternates. That will leave them with 3 alternate vacancies on that commission. So that's, but they will at least have their regular members be full up.
So who's stepping down?
You have my sheet.
One is Jack Ludwig, right?
Yeah, Jack, and I forget who the other one was.
Was he an alternate? He was an alternate, but isn't he stepping down?
Yeah,
even
I'll
as
tell
an
him, I can read it faster, I think. So for the
I'm trying to
Municipal
remember.
Building Committee, Jack Ludwig and Bill Perone are stepping down as regulars, and Amy Frost is stepping down as an alternate. And so the 3 alternates were Amy and Colette and Ed. And what Mr. Checo has recommended, that we just bump up Colette and Ed to regular members. And then they'll go to work on talking to the Republicans and the Democrats and anybody else they know in town who has building type skills to bring them onto that commission. That's an interestingly challenging commission. So I'd like to move that the Selectmen appoint Ed Bossio from alternate to a regular member of the Municipal Building Committee for the term 2/5/24 to 2/7/2028.
I'll second that. Yeah, Ed's a Republican.
And Ed's a
We should just say
Republican.
that for the public. I second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Move that the Selectmen appoint Colette Sturm from alternate to regular member of the Municipal Building Committee with the term 2/5/24 to 2/7/2028.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next one was brought forward by the Library Commission, and Mr. Kwok has submitted his bio brief. So I'd like to make a motion that the Selectmen appoint Frank Kwok, an unaffiliated, as a member of the Library Board of Trustees with a term 2/5/24 to 2/7/28.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next one was a letter to the first Selectman's office, and I move that the Selectmen appoint Matt Grimes, a Republican, as an alternate to the Zoning Commission with the term, and this is a change, 2/5/24 to 12/1/25. Because the same advice from council that we have to coincide them with the start of the new Planning and Zoning Commission when we get there. So it's actually a relatively short appointment.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I'm a no.
I'm sorry,
I'm opposed.
you're a no? Okay. 2-1. Okay.
Okay, the next one is actually rather routine. The Retirement Benefits Advisory, RBAC Committee, actually has 3 members that are appointed by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Education. We're ratifying that here so that there's an official record. So I will move that the Selectmen appoint Bob Belden, me, as the Board of Selectmen rep, Nahid Quasar, as a Democrat, as the Board of Finance rep, and Joy Greenstein, a Republican, as the Board of Education rep, to the Retirement Benefits Advisory Committee for the term 1/1/2024 to 12/1/2025. These 3 individuals serve with their term, right? So that's why it's 12/1/2025.
That makes sense. I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Wait. Back to the discussion part.
Yeah.
You're in a hurry to get home, huh?
I just said any discussion. I didn't hear anybody
Give
want
me
to.
a second to respond.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
So, Retirement Benefits Advisory Committee. How many people are on that?
It's made up by ordinance. It's made up of a representative from each of the 3 major boards, the treasurer, and 3 members of the public.
So,
And so these are the 3 we reappointed, the only one who was up was Scott McCarthy, and he's agreed to extend. We already put that in the reappointments. There are 2 other members of the public, Mike Mattson, Monica. And then each of the 3 boards names their liaison representative to that board, and they have all voted during the month of December to appoint. And Steve, you named it in your liaisons for us.
So, Nahid, okay, I see. All right, Joy.
Yeah, so the Board of Finance talked about it and named Nahid as the Board of Finance rep on that committee, and Joy was named by the Board of Education.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is really a rubber stamp, quite frankly, more, because those boards are actually naming their own reps, but in order to make it an official membership of the board, we just really ought to go through this motion.
So you were previously the Board of Ed rep.
I was previously the Board of Ed rep.
That's right.
Stepped down from that, and now I'm being reappointed for the 15th straight year onto this commission.
Okay.
Are you like ex officio or?
No, they're voting members. The only ex officio member is the town control.
Okay.
Okay. All right, having made the motion and seconded it, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Abstain.
And Bob's gonna
Since I'm in
abstain.
it. That's the right thing to do.
Okay.
I just want to go back real quick to that
Yep.
appointment of Matt Grimes that you all just made. I
Mhm.
mean, Steve and Bob, for the record, you are agreeing to have somebody of that caliber be a representative of this town.
Yes.
He allegedly went after a senior citizen of this town, and we're gonna have him be a seated member of the committee.
He's been on that committee before. He's been the chairman of the Board of Education
That
before and
decision.
served very well in both of those. So I understand the commentary that we heard tonight, but I also.
It wasn't just tonight, it was several months ago.
Yeah, but I also know Mr. Grimes and how he serves on boards, so he does a very admirable job on
Well,
boards.
it sounds like a political favor to me.
I don't think it's I have seen Matt Grimes on boards, and Matt and I don't agree on a lot of political things, but he has always acted on boards in a totally and complete above-board manner, following the rules and doing what's right for the town. And anybody like that, I'm willing to have, and I'm happy to
I actually have
him.
another reason for voting for it. Matt was chairman of that, or vice chair of that commission, and we are going through a major change to put planning and zoning together. He brings a ton of experience to that board. So I think that in that role, he will be helpful, so.
I just, it's amazing you'd support somebody like that.
Okay. The next motion is the other 3 youth members that were brought forward by the Youth Commission. Here we're also only naming them for a couple of months, and they'll bring back a full slate. So, so the motion is that the selectmen appoint Evan Lucas, Fatima Abdul Rahman, and Maria Coelho as the Youth Commission non-voting student members for the term 2/5/24 to 8/31/2024.
I will second that. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I will make, can I make the last one?
I'm not involved in the last one, so
Oh, no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead. You're on a roll.
I will get to vote, so.
You're on a roll. You want to make the motion?
No.
Oh, you don't, okay. I would make a motion that the selectmen appoint the following town officers for a term of 2/5/24 to 2/2/26. For assessor, Tammy Fisk. For building official, Bill Babiak. For chief of police, John Puglisi. For our controller, director of finance, Marcia Marion. For our emergency management director, Sarah Palmer. For our director of health, Aaron Salin. For director of parks and rec, Laura Murphy. Director of public works, Ralph Tedesco. Our fire marshal, Mike Connors. Deputy fire marshal, Kevin Mooney. Land use enforcement officer, Laura Barkowski. Zoning enforcement officer, Francis Lally. Municipal agent for the elderly, Ellen Melville. Municipal historian, Louis Quinn. Sanitarian, Paul Avery. Tax collector, Roberta Sinatra. And tree warden, Ralph Tedesco. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion on these appointments? Hearing none, all those in favor of making these appointments, please say aye. Aye.
I'm a nay.
I'm sorry?
I'm a no.
No for all of them?
Well,
Okay.
you lumped them together, so
Is there, we can back one out if you want to pull one out.
I don't agree with reappointing the controller. And others on the list I haven't met, so I can't vote because I don't know them.
Well, we can do this one by one if you'd like.
It's not about what I like, Steve. You asked for the vote. I'm saying I'm a no.
Across the board. Okay, if that's the way you want to leave it. I'm just saying we could go by job, and you could vote nay for the ones that you don't care for.
Well, I just told you I don't
Okay,
believe that
so
the
we're gonna go
controller
back.
should be reappointed.
Okay, just the controller? So we
Yes.
will note that, so,
And Mr. Louis Quinn, I've never met him.
okay. So
I know Lou really well. You would love Lou as a town historian.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Lou Quinn?
Yeah, Lou
What a
Quinn.
great guy for town historian.
Yeah.
And Kevin Mooney, I have yet to meet.
Okay, so you want to vote no just for those three?
No, there's only one vote. You made a single
Yeah, we
motion.
only have a
You're
one
just
vote.
making a note, that's all.
Okay, okay. So we've done it, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
She already
We
voted,
already
we
did
already
that,
voted, so.
and you're a no. Okay, we're gonna leave that 2-1. No, okay.
I'd like to make a motion to go back to item 7, updates. I had sent you an email on Friday morning with a request to add 731 Federal Road back to the agenda. And you wrote me back asking why I don't have a motion for that request. There's no requirement for a motion to be on an agenda. So what is the process for selectmen to have an item added to the agenda?
You ask, and then we make a decision. It's always been the first selectman's, just as when you were first selectman, you make the decision as to the agenda. What
Yeah,
items go on the
anytime
agenda.
somebody asked me to put something on it, I obliged.
Yeah, in this case, you asked to put on something that has already been discussed, reviewed, and voted on by the Board of Selectmen. Our job is not to go back and rehash decisions that have already been made. Our job is to move forward.
But
And
we
that's
made a
why I asked you
decision
if you had a
without having all the
motion.
information we
Wait a
needed.
minute, let me finish. If you had a motion you wanted to make on 731 Federal Road, I was more than willing to add it back to the agenda. You didn't give us a motion. This board is not, and I don't think it should be, in the place of having discussions about things that have already been voted on and decided. Our job is to move forward.
We can rescind a vote,
You can.
and
You
the
can.
vote should not have been made because we didn't have the information we needed to make the vote.
We had all the
But
information.
it's neither here nor there. My request is to
Well, first thing is,
have
we
an
have to
item
be,
added, and you blatantly told me no because I didn't have a motion provided.
okay? Now, the first problem we have
Is
there
the
is,
agenda ours or yours?
the agenda is the Board of Selectmen's, but it was set up by the first selectman, just like when you were the first selectwoman, you set the agenda. If
So-
somebody came to you and said, I wanna talk about monkeys, would you have added that to the
I
agenda?
wasn't asking to talk about monkeys, I was asking
Yeah.
to talk about a tax abatement.
Yeah, and we've already discussed that, argued it, and voted on it. I saw no need
And the
to
vote
add
was
that.
in error because we didn't have the substantiating
You can,
information.
and the way to correct that is, tonight, you can say, I wanna make a motion to discuss 731.
I just made that motion.
I didn't hear you make that. Is that the motion you made?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So, do we have a second to discuss the 731 Federal Road tax abatement?
Yes,
Okay,
That was a second?
yes.
that was the second.
Yes, if there was a second, I said yes.
All in favor?
All in,
Of
all in
adding it
favor
to
of
the
having a
agenda?
discussion?
All in favor of adding it to the agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, I'm a no, because I think we discussed it already. Okay.
But we can't actually enter into a discussion unless there's now a motion on the table.
Yeah.
Are you gonna put a motion to now rescind our vote from last week?
Well, yes, I'd like to make
Because
a
I mean,
motion
that's,
that
you
we
know how it
rescind
works. You
our
have to put a
vote.
motion on the table, and you have discussion and stuff like that, so.
I think, yes, our vote was made in error, and I'd like to make the motion that we rescind that vote.
Okay, do we have a second?
No.
I'm not gonna second. That means that we don't take a vote on it. That fails 2-1, right? There's no
Oh,
second.
there's
So
no
there's
second.
no second, it doesn't even fail, it just doesn't even make the, cut. Okay, having been through that, not hearing any further business, I hereby adjourn this meeting. No further business. Thank you, everybody.